There is a sound that defines Silicon Valley. It isn't the click of a keyboard. It isn't the notification ping of a smartphone. It is the sound of a voice, a deep, commanding baritone, authoritative, hypnotic, and completely fake.
Just trust yourself, then you will know how to live.
Elizabeth Holmes wasn't just a CEO. She was a performance artist. She wore the black turtlenecks like Steve Jobs. She stared without blinking, like a predator. And she lowered her voice to the register of a man to convince powerful billionaires to hand over their fortunes. She promised a miracle, a machine named the Edison. 1 drop of blood, 200 tests. No needles, no pain. It was the holy grail of medicine. She was valued at $9 billion. She was the youngest self-made female billionaire in history. But inside the lab, the machines were broken, the blood was spilled, and the miracle was a lie. Welcome to the story of Theranos. It started with a fear of needles, or so the story goes. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford at 19. She didn't want to learn engineering. She wanted to be Steve Jobs. Not just like him. She wanted to be him. She tracked down the exact same black turtlenecks that Jobs wore. She furnished her office with the same Le Corbusier furniture. She even started holding meetings on Fridays, just like Apple. But Steve Jobs had one thing Elizabeth didn't. A product that worked. She called her invention the Edison. The idea was seductive. Instead of vials of blood, just a nanotainer, a tiny capsule. Investors were mesmerized. Rupert Murdoch, Larry Ellison, Henry Kissinger, old, powerful men, charmed by a young woman who looked them in the eye and promised to save the world. They didn't check the science. They checked her charisma, and the check cleared. But behind the glass walls of Theranos HQ, reality was messy. The Edison machine was a disaster. It was too small. The robotic arms were clumsy. The blood samples would get hot inside the machine and explode. So, how did they show investors that it worked? They cheated. It was a magic trick. When VIPs came for a demo, the screen would say processing, but in reality, the machine was doing nothing. Employees would take the blood out the back door, run it on standard Siemens machines bought from competitors, and then type the results back into the Edison. It wasn't technology, it was theater. And to keep the theater running, Elizabeth needed an enforcer. Enter Ramesh Sunny Balwani, Elizabeth's secret boyfriend, and the company's president. If Elizabeth was the face, Sunny was the fist. He created a culture of absolute fear. He monitored employee emails. He tracked their badge swipes. He fired people on the spot for asking questions. The tragedy of Ian Gibbons. Ian was the chief scientist, a brilliant British chemist. He knew the technology was fake. He tried to raise alarms, but Elizabeth and Sunny silenced him. Faced with a lawsuit where he would have to testify and lie, Ian Gibbons took his own life. When Elizabeth heard the news, she didn't send flowers. She didn't offer condolences to his widow. Instead, she sent a team to his house to confiscate his laptop, to protect the secrets. The empathy was gone, replaced by the mission. secrets have a way of leaking. Enter Tyler Schultz, the grandson of George Schultz, one of Theranos' most famous board members. Tyler was young, idealistic, and he saw the fraud firsthand. He saw the fake data. He saw the lies. He tried to tell his grandfather, but George Schultz chose Elizabeth over his own grandson. So Tyler did the unthinkable. He contacted a reporter, John Carreyrou, of the Wall Street Journal. For months, Carreyrou investigated. Theranos hired private investigators to follow him. They threatened to sue the newspaper into bankruptcy. Sunny Balwani shouted, "I will bury you." But on October 15, 2015, the article was published. The glass house shattered. The downfall was slow, then sudden. Walgreens pulled out. The FDA raided the labs. The valuation went from $9 billion to zero. In the courtroom, the voice changed. The black turtleneck disappeared. She wasn't the Steve Jobs of biotech anymore. She played the victim, but the jury didn't buy it. Sunny Balwani, sentenced to nearly 13 years. Elizabeth Holmes, sentenced to over 11 years. The Edison machine sits in a government warehouse somewhere, a plastic box full of broken dreams. Elizabeth Holmes is in prison, but the culture that created her is still alive. Fake it till you make it. It's the motto of Silicon Valley. Elizabeth just took it too far. She faked the science. She faked the results. She faked herself. And perhaps the scariest part is not that she lied. It's that for so long, we desperately wanted to believe her. Stories like this don't disappear. They don't end in a courtroom or behind a prison door. They change shape. They move to new companies, new founders, new promises. Because the real danger was never just Elizabeth Holmes. It was the silence around her, the people who didn't ask questions, and the millions who wanted to believe. This channel exists for one reason: to slow these stories down, to look at them closely before they become untouchable. If you believe stories like this matter, if you think truth deserves time, then stay with us. Because the next illusion won't look like a lie. It will look like the future.